Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
Hey, this is Reb Beach from Winger and Whitesnake, and you're listening to The Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast with Jay Scott, the place to be for great rock and roll discussions and new rock music.
Good evening, everybody. It is Jay Scott. This is The Hook Rocks, the ultimate rock community podcast. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe, staying healthy. I say the same thing after or during the intro of every episode, but I hope all my listeners are staying healthy and trying to find an escape. And we are here for you to do that. We're talking music. We're interviewing great bands, great new bands, legacy artists. And today we have the return of a South of Eden member. Well, not really a return of a member, but second time I've had a member from that band on the show. And we had Ehab on about 2 months ago, and now we have the lead guitar player, Justin Young. What's going on, Justin? How you doing?
I'm good, Jay. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you very much for doing this. I'm really excited. I had the pleasure of interviewing Ehab Amran a couple months ago. You guys are one of my favorite new bands ever since the days of Black Coffee. I Barely Know Her, which was just an awesome tune.
Thank you.
And I've been following you guys, along here on your journey. Seeing you guys go do the showcase at the Viper Room, and I think it was the I want to say the Whiskey, and then
Yep, that's correct.
Yep, and now you got the record deal. Ehab told me about the whole story with that, and the EP is now out, which is just awesome. And then you've got the Audio Slave cover tune. Lots to get into with you, but once again, thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, man, for having me on. I'm glad to be the second member of the band to come on your show and heard great things from Ehab, and I'm really excited about the fact that he was already able to talk to you, so you got all the general questions out of the way. Now we can dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, there we go. Absolutely. I like I told Ehab, what was so exciting for me with this EP was my son is 15 and he loves you guys. Him and his friends, here outside of Chicago, are totally into South of Eden, and they were waiting for the record, the EP, to drop, and they were all on social media. I think they were all on Snapchat, just waiting for it. And they all had their video as they were listening together with each other. Obviously, they couldn't because of the pandemic, but they got to experience that. And it reminded me of a time when I was younger, when I used to stand outside the record store waiting for the new release to come out that I was going to get that night. And it was just really exciting to see that the younger generation really connecting with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, man. That's great to hear. I'm so, excited that your son and his friends are picking up, what we're putting down. And, we're seeing that kind of, that's been kind of what's been happening, not only around the country, but around the globe. We get people shouting us out from Spain and Italy and Australia and all these places, and it's such a humbling experience for us to go through, because it's, for everybody, it's been kind of a crazy year, and being able to, give a little teaser for our album out there with this EP, with these 4 songs on the talk. It's been great for us to kind of give something back to the fans, while also, our existing fans from the Black Coffee days, but also giving a little, teaser for the new South of Eden fans, and just kind of getting them aware, of what's happening, here. And that's really exciting to hear that the young crowd, like I said, we've been seeing the same thing happening around us. It's really exciting because it's like one of my things is that I want to get to a point where kids, are more inspired to pick up a guitar or instead of drumsticks to sit behind a piano, rather than picking up a Xbox controller, So that's something that we aspire to kind of head towards.
Well, he plays guitar. My 15-year-old son plays guitar. He's practicing, 3 to 5 hours a day whenever he can get it in. I do know from what he's told me, I think he's connected with you guys on Instagram, and he's always asking for someone to teach him how to play Dancing with Fire. So if there's that kid
what is your son's name?
Well, I'll tell you when we're done. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you when we're done.
Yeah.
But he's always like, I think he's always like trying to connect with you guys because he's always playing. He's like, how do you play Dancing with Fire? So, once we hang up, we'll definitely we'll talk about that. But
yeah, we'll take care of that for sure.
Yes. But what's really cool too is when I got the CD for Black Coffee. And it was just a phenomenal, the Take One record. It was a phenomenal record. I remember going to see Blackberry Smoke and this other band called Ida May, which is this 2-piece band out of UK by way of Nashville. And my buddy picked me up. We were going to go see him, and I brought a CD. I brought the Take One CD in the car, and I'm like, dude, you got to check this out. This is so awesome. So I put it in the CD player, and we're just kind of listening, right? We're just taking it in, and he's not saying anything. And he's like, these guys are new? And I go, yeah. He goes, this is awesome. He goes, this is great. He's like, younger kids are like, because we're in our 40s, so everybody's, kids to us. So we're like, he's like, kids are playing music like this. He's like, how do they learn how to play this stuff? I'm like, well, obviously they did, man. They're freaking phenomenal. So, but yeah, it's been great to experience the new released EP. I know it's just a teaser of what's to come, which is really exciting. But yeah, I am so excited about you guys and going into 2021, which is right around the corner. Hopefully things get back to normal, and hopefully we get more South of Eden.
Oh, absolutely, and that's kind of the thing that we're looking forward to the most. You know what I mean? We're looking forward to, like you said, hopefully turning this corner and getting into next year and, getting back to a sense of, normalcy, so to speak. And, we had a lot of things that we were excited, a lot of festivals that were kind of just getting on the cusp of being announced for 2020, right when, this COVID situation happened. And we're really thankful that we've gotten, to get the call back for those festivals next year. We're just kind of hoping, like everybody else, that these things happen. As soon as the world kind of opens back up, or at least there's somewhat of a plan formulated for artists to go and tour where it makes sense, and they're not losing their behind left and right, which is kind of the hard thing to get around right now, because a lot of places are doing bringing back live music, but they're doing it at half capacity. And it's kind of cool. For example, we're playing a couple shows in our hometown, Columbus, this weekend. 2 sold-out nights on Friday and Saturday at a place called 20 Pub. And, we're super excited to get to play in front of our fans. And, those are going to be totally socially distanced, safe concerts for the fans to come to. But, it is going to be half capacity. And that's just kind of the way that it's rolling right now. We're kind of living with the hand that we've been dealt, so to speak, just like everybody else. And we kind of, as I mentioned a little bit, earlier on, that, we really just, it came down to we wanted to release this 10-song art piece of an album that we kind of look at it as an art piece, kind of like, the bands that we look up to, did it when they were releasing vinyls in 60s and 70s and early 80s. We really want to create that experience for the listener. So it's cool for, kids to put an album on again and listen to every song. But it got to a point where it was like, hey, we could be waiting forever to release this thing. And, on the flip side of that coin was we don't know what's the market going to do. You know, are people going to want to consume music right now when everything is, you know, everything's the whole world's so polarized right now with so many different things. So it was really cool and a really, you know, humbling experience to see that when we did put the Talk EP out, and when we did come to that decision that was the route that we were going to go, you know, the response has been so positive and really uplifting for us all. Because, you know, like I said, with everybody, I mean, it's been a hard year for us to kind of coordinate through, and, you know, mentally, you know, hard, just like it is on everybody else. So it was a really rewarding thing to see.
Yeah, we got lots to get to. We're all going to get into it. I can't forget, though, what we always ask first-time guests every time they appear on the show. I did the same thing with Ehab when he was on, and that is the essence of the podcast, which is the hook. Just like every rock song has a hook that sucks you in, every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, an album, a band, or performance that hooked them on rock and roll. What hooked you, Justin?
That's a great question. I think that the first was probably when I was about 12, 13. I don't really know how exactly it happened, but my dad was really into, you know, doing the surround sound system thing at home. That was like a big thing when I was, you know, growing up as a kid. Like, oh, look at we can do surround sound in the living room now. So he would go and just stockpile up on all of these live DVD concerts. And I remember, you know, coming home from school one day, and there's this loud, hard hitting in your face music was playing from the living room, and I came inside, and it was AC/DC live at Donington in '91. And when I saw Angus walk up on stage, you know, right before he hits the opening notes of Thunderstruck, and he just puts his arm up to the crowd, and, you know, tens of thousands of people in the audience all going crazy, and then watching guys with all the energy, you know, running all across the stage, and, you know, being the showman that he is, and then also playing, you know, this awesome, you know, music that I had never heard of. You know, that was the thing that really, they were kind of the band that drew me in to rock and roll. And then when I discovered the Van Halen 5150 Live Without a Net DVD, I saw Eddie play. That was it for me. I was hooked. You know, AC/DC was the band that got me hooked on rock. Van Halen was the band that got me hooked on guitar. So without those two bands, I would not be talking to you right now. Trust me.
Well, that's great. I mean, those are great, iconic bands. You know, I still remember being, 8 years old, 7 years old, I think, in 1982. And I was home from school that day. I don't know if I faked being sick or what was the circumstance. And I knew my brother had the Van Halen vinyl in his room. And my mom was cleaning the house, and I snuck the vinyl out of his room, put it on the turntable with the headphones. And I remember hearing Eruption as a 7-year-old kid. And it was just magic. It was like, I remember just like grabbing the headphones with my hands and like, what is he doing? How is he playing this? Like, what's he doing? Like, I couldn't understand it. And you know, that was the era of, you know, Star Wars and all these things. And it sounded like a spaceship. It didn't sound like a guitar. And I remember how that just resonated with me. And it just continued. You know, my first connection with music was Journey Escape, you know, back in when I was like 6. And that was, you know, my first connection. But when I heard Van Halen, it was just like, wow, like the world just opened up for me. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of those iconic bands, man. And you be careful mentioning Van Halen and Star Wars in the same sentence, because we will be talking for hours, because those are two things. I geek out about guitars. I geek out about like old vintage cars, and I geek out about Star Wars, man. Those are my three things. So,
well, you know, The Mandalorian is what, October 30th?
Yes, I am. I'm jonesing for some Mandalorian. Trust that show really, the first season really took me by surprise. I don't know if it was necessary, if it was because I just had really low expectations. Or I think it was a combination of that, but then it just being really good. And it was like, wow, these guys really seem to get that kind of the vibe of Star Wars, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah, me too. I was very pleasantly surprised. It was very kind of a throwback of like a Western type of style, the way it was filmed, and I'm looking forward for season 2.
Absolutely, likewise.
Yeah. So as you're growing as an artist, I mean, AC/DC is the first band that connected you with rock. Van Halen influenced you with guitar. What was the moment when you wanted to be on stage?
Oh gosh, that's another great question. I mean, I kind of knew. I mean, if you ask my mom, she'll tell you that I wanted to be sure I was going to be on stage from the time I was 4 years old. But just with being the kid that runs around anytime I would just kind of had all this pent up energy as a kid. And whenever we'd have people over at the house, I was doing, I was reenacting Chris Farley skits on Saturday Night Live, or I was just always doing something. So I think that when I found, because the first instrument I should throw this out there, but I learned how to play was actually the drum. So, and the reason being was that my uncle was a drummer. So I would go, family gatherings and stuff over to his house, and you walk in and you hear Subdivision. He was a huge Rush freak, and you walk in and hear them, playing along Subdivision or Dreamline or Limelight or whatever it be that day, and being able to, hit, this instrument, the drum set really hard and really loud, get your emotions out of it, and get all that energy out. That's kind of when I started playing the drums, when I knew that I needed to do something with music, because it was a way for me. I was never really good with my words, still working on it. And, for me, when I was a kid, it accomplished those two things. It let me get all of this energy out that I was just so wired and needed to desperately get out of my system. And then also it gave me a voice. And that's something, when, after a couple of years of playing the drums, right around the time I discovered, Eddie, I mean, that's when I was like, okay, I need to get a guitar now. I really, really need, this is something that I have to start pursuing. And I was doing, little things growing up. You have your middle school talent shows and your variety shows in high school and things like that. But I never really had a band. I was always doing the solo thing. I'd go up and I'd take, 1 year I took like probably like 3 minutes worth of my favorite Van Halen solos and just put them all in, just kind of messed them up into one, and I just went out there and I just played it, so it was just, that's kind of one of the things that I would tell, musicians who are just starting out, don't wait around for, other people to come start a band, or go to those blues jams, go to the rock jams, go and, if you're really young and you're going through middle school, high school still, go out, and who cares if you don't have a band, man? Because we had bands, and when I was in school, and I was kind of the odd man out, and I was like, well, I'm not going to let, the fact of not having a band stop me from performing in front of people. So, I just kind of went for it. And shortly after I graduated high school, I was kind of stuck in the same limbo, like, I was in a band with Tommy, our drummer, but we could kind of tell just with where the other members' personal lives were at, that it wasn't going to be a real longevity to that. And, after that, I started kind of having to make a decision, and that's when I found Berklee College of Music, and I started kind of pursuing that. Went to school there for 5 semesters. And that was, the best part of that experience was it allowed me the opportunity for the first time in my life to focus on nothing but music. And, I went and did that. It was great. I was thrown into these ensembles that I would have never, thought of throwing myself into before, whether it's a Brazilian jazz ensemble or it's just a classic American jazz ensemble for that matter. a chicken picking, Chet Atkins, Jerry Reed, which is still by far my favorite class I've taken at that school, because that's just Jerry Reed is was an unbelievable guitar player out of this world. And so when I went to Berkeley, it opened my ears up to so many different sounds. And you probably aren't going to pick up the Jerry Reed on South on a South Eden record, but you might hear a little bit of something in there in my solos, because now I've heard these sounds and I kind of put them in the tool belt, so when I go to express myself in those solos, sometimes I hear that really cool jazz C5 lick, and it gets to come out there. Sometimes I hear this really cool, little chicken picking kind of just little 3 or 4 seconds, not too much, but.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I had a really good conversation with Tyler Bryant yesterday, and, he couldn't wait to be done with high school, because he was so frustrated, because he knew what he wanted to do, and he knew school was just taking up time for him in order for him to do what he did. And he actually, left high school at 17 to move to Nashville, and, he promised his parents that he would, still get his diploma and everything, but he went and he was playing these, small gigs and everything, but he just felt so happy to be doing nothing but music.
Yeah, and I mean, I can, that's something that I can completely relate to, because, I was okay in school. I was not a straight A student by any stretch of the imagination. I did okay in the history classes, English class, but then math and science, that kicked my booty, my whole life pretty much. And I'm just I can relate to them and Tyler. Their band is so amazing. And his story is really cool. And, I feel a very similar way about that. Feeling like you're stuck in a situation, putting all your time, effort, and energy towards something that it's okay, well, I get to get this piece of paper. I get to go, walk for, 30 seconds and wave to mom and dad and take all the pictures and stuff. But what am I actually getting out of it? It's just keeping me from the guitar. So I can totally get it to that.
One of the things that I noticed about South of Eden, I picked up on this right away, especially with the Dancing with Fire video, and then some of the other videos that I had seen on YouTube prior to that, is about just the fun you guys are having. You mentioned AC/DC, you mentioned Van Halen, Ehab mentioned Guns N' Roses and some other bands too as well. But you guys totally have that vibe about bringing the fun back into rock music. Sometimes it's gotten a little too serious. And, when you think of those bands from yesteryear, like your AC/DCs and your Van Halens and your Guns N' Roses, it was about the lifestyle. It was about the party. And not that your songs are about that, but the vibe you guys generate, especially in that video, like I said, with Dancing with Fire, is just wow. It's just, the one way I describe you guys is just power. It's just got a full sonic sound that just, puts you on your ass.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. It's definitely, it's not contrived, in any way. It's just something that kind of comes out natural to us. And we were just actually talking about this the other day. I can't remember what the topic was, but we were basically, I was telling Ehab, I was like, we're not the fake it until you make it type of guys. You know what I mean? We wear our hearts on our sleeves, and we're so just open and honest in who we are that it's kind of impossible for us to do anything not authentic, for better or for worse. And that's something that we've always kind of tried to, hold firm and hold close to the chest, is the fact that, the artists and, bands that seem to have the longest, the most longevity in their careers are the ones who, develop their own sound and have a uniqueness to them. And I think at the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head. I think music, especially in the rock genre, sometimes it became a little bit too serious. it became a little bit like too cool for school. You know what I mean? Like when I see a lot of bands like going up and they just look like they're like kind of angry on stage. You know what I mean? Or they look like they're not really having fun. And I just look at it and it's like, wow, this music is awesome, but like, you know, it's like you're having a fun. You know what I mean? And I'm like jonesing to get up there when you get me on stage. Like you can't wipe the smile off my face because I've been looking forward to do it. You know, doing that all day long. You know, in this case, you know, weeks and months. You know, looking forward to it. So, you know, I mean, you look back at those bands. You know, like you mentioned, Van Halen, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses. You know, we are not in their we are not in their league when it comes to partying, for sure. Now, I think that's probably more of a sign of the times than anything else. You know, I think that, I mean, you know, we've been around that stuff long enough to, you know, not to put junk in our bodies, and we like to have fun. You know, we're not a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses. I guess not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, we're definitely not partying on the level of those guys. And you know, in that video, like you said, with Dancing with Fire, man, I mean, that's just who we are at the end of the day. And, you know, we really don't know, we wouldn't know what to do otherwise. We certainly, I don't think, would be successful at it.
You know, my journey in rock was, you know, started at a very, you know, young age in the 80s. And, you know, when I talk about Van Halen or AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, I mean, I grew up in that era of excess, right? You know, I mean, 80s, even though I was a young kid, I mean, you know, we can include Motley Crue in this conversation and all those bands from the Sunset Strip where everything was excessive. And, you know, a lot of them, you know, paid the price, you know, with their lifestyle. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, after watching the movie The Dirt with Motley Crue, it was like, man, how are these guys still alive? You know, it's like, it's just amazing. But even outside of the excess, and there was a fun sense to the music, right? There was hey, you know what? I'm just going to click on MTV and I'm going to just chill out and watch these videos or watch these concerts that, you know, are on television, or go to these concerts, and everyone's just having a great, good time. And you know, when you know, to bring this up again, you know, when I watch that video and then you have the EP that comes out, it just feels like that vibe, that like it's grabbing you, it's moving you, and you can put on this music at a party and no one's going to leave the room. Everyone's going to be like, who is this? You know, what band is this? And that's what you want, right? You want people to kind of connect in that and you know, connect with your music and associate it with having a good time, you know? And I think that's what South of Eden brings to the table.
I mean, thank you so much for saying that. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, I mean, we look at, you know, the bands that we look up to and aspire to be like, you know, they come off to us as, you know, the type of guys that you would just want to shoot the breeze with, you know, and hang out with them. And then that's, at the end of the day, you know, we're just a couple of guys playing rock and roll, man. You know, there's not a whole lot of rocket science to it, but, you know, we're genuinely, I mean, we're best friends. When we're not playing, we're not rehearsing, we're hanging out together, you know, and joking around. And that's something that I hope never goes away, because, you know, that's you know, really at the start of all this, what we, you know, all do this for. It's like we love the music, we love the camaraderie, we love being able to create something with other people, you know what I mean? Being able to create music with individuals who have their own, you know, mind, you know, their own mind of where a song is going to go, you know, and then all of a sudden the drummer sits behind the kit and throws out this crazy drum beat that you would have never expected to throw in there, and you go, hey, that's kind of cool. You know, that's kind of what we aspire to be like, you know, and yeah, I think that once we can get back out there and you know, get on the road, I think you're going to see what you've noticed in the songs on the album, on the EP, I should say, and with our music videos. You're going to see that, you know, amplified content on stage, because that's when, I mean, we record, you know, the music so we can go and perform it, you know. That's kind of the way that we look at it. We write songs and go and record them, you know, so that we can go and play them for people. And you know, in this day and age, man, like I said, about the world being so polarized, I mean, people have so so much stuff on their mind. You know what I mean? When you come to a show where you know, get to the end of your work day and you get to sit down and relax and, you know, crack a beer open or have a smoke, whatever you do, you know, you get to listen to our music. We want you to be there and experience that and just be able to shut everything off and just get into the music because it's helped us in a lot of ways for sure.
It is an exciting time for rock music. I mean, when you think about rock music and what's happening with the new bands right now, there's so many great new rock bands out there. And I think that 2020 was going to be that year where things were going to start to punch through and rock music was going to connect with the younger people. And we had to put that on pause, unfortunately. But I think we're building kind of a recipe for what's going to happen after this when people start to be able to go out, because rock and roll always relies on that angst. And there's nothing better to build angst when people are locked in their house and they're only able to do certain things. They can't go see live shows. And I think when all this music comes out in 2021, I think rock and roll is going to explode again. What do you think?
Oh, I think it's going to explode. I think it's going to be, you know, the biggest party on the town, man. I mean, I think that like you said, there's clearly a hunger for rock and roll, not only in the States, but globally. I mean, we see it everywhere. We see, you know, as another band, I mean, AC/DC starting to kind of leak their stuff out just today. And I guarantee they're going to go hit the road for probably 2 or 3 years when they, you know, when it's opened up. And at the end of the day, you know, people are, like you said, people are creeped up and getting a little bit anxious and getting a little stir crazy being at home. And I anticipate the exact same thing that you do when this opens back up.
When you think about what's needed in rock, you know, the connection to young people, we talked about, you know, the experience of watching my son with the music that you guys put out. And we mentioned them briefly here, Motley Crue. When you look at the movie The Dirt and you look at how the demographic changed of who was buying their merchandise, who was buying their music, it went from, you know, an over 30 crowd, over 35 crowd to under 35, almost overnight after that movie came out. And I talked to my son and his friends. They've all seen the movie. It's like the Fast Times at Ridgemont High of their generation. That means a lot.
Exactly.
That means a lot because that means rock music is now in the wheelhouse of a young teenager, right? I mean, they're now connecting to it, which is what's needed because let's face it, hip hop and pop music have been dominant over the last decade or so. And rock music has kind of taken a back seat. And I think that's going to stop. I think, obviously, I felt 2020 was going to be that year. We had to put it on pause. And, you know, when you think of the great new bands out there, you think of South of Eden, you think of other bands as well that are out and ready to shine and ready to make that connection. And I think it's really exciting with the music you guys are putting out and the potential to capture that young audience.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, what a treasure trove of music to go back and listen to. You know what I mean? We're talking about, I mean, my gosh, you can go back all the way to the Beatles. That's, you know, 50 plus years of music for the young generation to, you know, go and experience all that because they're going to be listening. They're listening to that for the first time, you know, and there's a reason why, you know, people still listen to their old Led Zeppelin records and people are, you know, experiencing new bands, you know, to take it further. I mean, look at this was, what was it, 2019, they just announced was the first year that vinyl sales were higher than CD sales since CDs were a thing. And I think that, you know, it's a whole vibe. It's a rock and roll is a vibe, it's a mentality, it's a way of life. And, you know, it's really awesome to see, you know, the young generation being so inspired by it because, you know, like I said, I mean, there's just so much music out there that, I mean, you could spend too much time going through all of the great old bands and you know, it's an exciting time for sure. You know, like you said, I think we were all anticipating the same thing with 2020, but I don't, you know, I think that this is just a pause, like you said. It's not a detour. It's literally, I think it's literally just a pause because, once this gets going again, that rock and roll train, it's only going to pick up more and more steam. And you're going to find more and more bands that are coming out of the woodwork, and because hey, there's clearly a hunger for it.
And that's evident too with your EP. You mentioned how the release of that music exceeded your expectation in terms of the response. And that's awesome. For a band to do that, a new band without touring, right? Because that's the whole idea of releasing new music, is you go out and you support it, you bring it to the fans, you build an audience, and to have that response that you guys are having without touring, with having very limited, live shows prior to the release as South of Eden, it's remarkable, and I think that's a gauge of about what's for what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, and I like I said, we're just humbled by it, and I certainly hope that you're correct. And it has been awesome to see that even with this pause, all the stuff that's happened to us. If you would have told me when I was 14 that one day Rolling Stone magazine is going to premiere one of your music videos for a single that comes out, I would have told you were nuts. And then a week later, Spin Magazine's going to share, a cover, an Audio Slave cover, the little live thing that we did in the studio, so to see it all come to fruition has been awesome. It's so crazy because it's such a catch-22. It's such a bittersweet kind of a thing, because it's like, man, this is so freaking cool. This is so awesome. Oh my God, I want to play a show so bad, and it's just one of those things where we're all, kind of the whole music community is in it together. Right now there's not really one, we're all being affected by it, from, the people who are, mega stars. You talk about your Taylor Swift and Katy Perry's and, Metallica and all these bands, all the way down to the bands that are playing in the clubs and, trying to get signed and trying to claw their way, to get, having some of the opportunities that we've had. We're all being affected by it in the same way. And so to see that response, it's been incredible. It's been really inspiring for us.
What was behind the decision to record the Audio Slave cover?
That was just something that kind of just happened. It's funny how many things just kind of happen, happen with us. Like, when you take our song, The Talk, that was a song that was written and recorded in, EHOB wrote the lyrics for that song back in like June of 2019, and the opening lyrics are in these trying times. Obviously that has, we had no idea, how true that would be, when the song became released. And then it's the same thing really with Show Me How to Live, with the Audio Slave song. It was just kind of like, probably a song that didn't really need to be revisited. Let's just go ahead and say that, because Audio Slave is such a great, phenomenal band that we look up to, and our influences go all the way up to now. It's an awesome, grunge, huge influence on us, and Rage Against the Machine was a huge influence on us. Soundgarden and Audio Slave. So it was just kind of a song that we had learned. It was kind of just always just a fun, cover to throw, in our repertoire to throw out, for shows. And we were in the studio, in Sonic Lounge Studios in Columbus a couple of months ago, kind of when we realized, hey, we gotta kind of refigure our game plan here. We were hanging out in the studio, recording some acoustic tracks, recording a couple of covers for, just to kind of have, what I mean, and have kind of in our tool belt, so that, when things like this happen, and we're not able to go and perform, we can, do this and throw it out to the audience. So it was just something where, John Payne, our photographer, was there documenting and capturing, us recording in the studio like he always does. And, about a week before we went into it, we were like, hey, why don't we just, play a couple songs and, do it live, no more than 2 or 3 takes, because that's what we always do. We always kind of, for whatever reason, we always end up settling on the second take. The second take seems to be like the catching the lightning, the lightning in a bottle sort of a thing. It's not really perfect, but there's just something about it that's like, okay, we can't touch this now. So, we did that, we did that just kind of on a whim, and we're happy that, again, like the response has been overwhelming for us, or overwhelming to us.
What's next for you guys? I mean, is there more music coming as we kind of wait for things to open up, or is it, you guys just going to sit tight and see what happens into 2021?
Well, we're definitely not just going to sit tight. I will say that it's just constantly evolving. I will say, go ahead and do the plug. South of Eden Band is our handle on all of our social media platforms, and that's where you can keep up to date on all the stuff that we're doing. We're shooting to release the full album by the end of this year. Being a realist, it might be the beginning of next year. But we're not letting this thing, we're not holding on to this thing for any longer. It's just kind of like, hey, at a certain point, just like we said with, the talk, you got to go, hey, you can't control what's going on. Let's just put this out there and let's go. So we have some things that we're going to be dropping on Facebook and on social media platforms here and there between now and when the full album gets released. So the fans can enjoy that. Like I said, we're doing a couple of sold out shows in my hometown this weekend, and we might be, hence filming that for a future release. So we're just kind of content. We're just stockpiling all the content right now so that we can, release it out to the folks, while we're waiting to get the rest of our music or the rest of this album released. And on top of that, we're constantly writing. Kind of like when we started this band, really going back to even Black Coffee. It was just kind of this fountain of music that has been falling out of us, and we just can't stop writing. So we just had this conversation the other day. It's like, we're kind of moving on to writing the next album, right now, and figuring out, what are our songs that we know for sure we want to focus on this. And I tell you, there's a new song that's written, damn near every day, where we go, wow, this is the next song that we have, and we always have to keep in mind that, like, so much of these songs, that are coming out on the album, we're so excited to get out on live, but we've been listening to them, for over a year now. That's hard for us because we want to put it out so much, and we write so much that we're kind of jonesing almost to go and record again. But it's like, hey, no, we got to go and take care of business with this album when it comes out. And so, we're always writing, and you'll be seeing a lot of content from us between now and the beginning of next year.
Out of something bad, something good always happens. And I guess that is the silver lining of this pandemic is, even though it's not what everybody wants, especially bands and musicians, it's given them the opportunity to create more. Because let's face it, I mean, the more you guys are out on the road, the more your audience is going to build, the more the name South of Eden is going to get out there, and the more money you guys are going to make. That's where bands make their money. And if you are recording and writing music and you've got all these songs in your arsenal, it makes it so much easier for you guys to maintain capturing an audience and not letting people forget about you if you have all this material ready to go.
And and that's the thing. And with, kind of the social media age that we live in right now, I mean, I've known since I was, in grade school that, I probably have ADD or ADHD or a combination of the two. But now with social media, it seems like people, the human attention span is just kind of shortening a little bit. And so just constantly, you're right, it's easy for people to maybe not necessarily just forget about you, but it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. And, that's been something that we've had to kind of adjust to and learn on the fly this year. But, I think that you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's only going to be a matter of time, not only for us, but for all the artists out there that are dying to get back on the road.
Justin, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for doing this. Again, huge fan of the band. You know, glad to have you on. I know my son's going to be excited to listen to this episode. But yeah, I have nothing but high hopes for you guys, and I think you guys are just going to be out kicking ass once everything opens up again.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on so much. And I hope that when it does open back up, we got to get you out to the show for sure. So
absolutely,
hopefully we'll link up sooner rather than later in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again to Justin Young from the band South of Eden. This is Jay Scott. This is the Hook Rocks, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will talk again soon. Thank you.